Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and this time we are talking about why the internet is going so crazy about Nintendo Switch 2 right now. What has changed? What is causing this stir? Well, that's what I'd like to dive further into today. But before going forward, let me ask that if you do enjoy my content, to please subscribe and hit that notification bell. Now, there are several layers to this overall situation. And there is something that's happened very recently that's leading to this stir. But first, let's start from the more surface level layers here. So, at face value, fans in general are just eager for some substantial Nintendo news. This year's Switch is arguably the most slow, the most dull yet, even compared to 2020, I would argue. Because in 2020, at least we had gotten a Nintendo Direct Mini. We've only gotten a partner showcase this year, no sort of general direct. And at least back in the beginning of 2020, there was a major Nintendo release in Animal Crossing New Horizons. We haven't seen anything so substantial. I'm personally very excited for €1,000 Dora Remake, but that's arguably the most exciting release we've had so far this year, and it is just a remake of a Paper Mario game. So the point is, fans have been eager for some more substantial Nintendo news, especially after we haven't gotten a general direct yet. But peeling back another layer here, we're in the 8th year of Nintendo Switch. This is a very long generation for Nintendo, and it's looking to be the longest generation yet. And so with that, the Switch is dated hardware. Many fans are ready to move on, and are eager for some substantial Switch 2 news, which we have yet to have received. But now peeling back another layer, many have been thinking that we might get some level of substantial Nintendo news with the upcoming fiscal earnings release that's bound to happen in just a few hours as of this recording, May 7th, 2024. When we go back to 2016, when we got that first fiscal earnings release of the fiscal year, Nintendo gave us a release time of March 2017 for the NX, because it was publicly known as the NX as far back as 2015. And so there's a bit of a minor difference there because Nintendo hasn't been as vocal about the Switch 2 as they were about the NX, the Switch back then. But with that fiscal year where we were expecting the console, that first earnings release, they gave us some substantial news about the console. And so many, myself included, have been optimistic that we might see something. Not necessarily a big trailer, maybe not even a press release, although I'm hoping for something like that with some tangible official confirmation, but at the very least, some sort of solid hint towards what's to come later this year, or at least by the end of the fiscal year. So many fans have been eager for this time, to hopefully get something. But now peeling back to the final layer here, over the last couple days, this anticipated buzz has been greater than expected. And that's because there's been an observation that Nintendo has updated their corporate governance report. And in this report, there does seem to be some talk of their next generation and their transition, which has led some outlets going as far as reporting that Nintendo has now indicated that they will be discussing Switch 2 with their next fiscal earnings release. So is this actually the case? I'm not so sure. I am optimistic we may get something, at least a hint, but I don't think we've gotten confirmation of really anything yet. So in order to better understand the situation, let's first talk about what a governance report is. Here it tells us the corporate governance definition. Corporate governance is the system of rules, practices, and processes by which a company is directed and controlled. That's it. It's a system of rules and practices and processes. So when Nintendo updates their governance report, their corporate governance report, it's telling us more about how they're running. And when we take a look at Nintendo's investor relations page, we saw that the last time they gave us an update to their corporate governance report was back in June 26, 2023, and now with the most recent one, it was March 27th. So it seems to be updated on maybe a semi-annual basis, something like that. It's not like every 3 months like a fiscal earnings release. It seems to happen whenever they feel the need to update the report. And so when we go in and we check the actual report, here, there are some substantial things, or at least some things that people feel are substantial. Details of dialogue with shareholders. Dialogue-based IR activities conducted in the 2024 fiscal year. So IR activities, investor relations activities. the sort of things Nintendo updates us on their investor relations page throughout the year. So here it reads, in addition to a corporate management policy briefing and 3 financial results briefings, the company conducted approximately 400 individual and group meetings combined with shareholders and institutional investors. The company has also attended conferences and other events held by securities companies. Furthermore, the company held individual SR and ESG meetings, actively creating opportunities for dialogue with a broad range of institutional investors both in Japan and outside of Japan, fund managers, analysts, ESG specialists, proxy voting representatives, and others, to further their understanding of the company. So the really cool thing that's mentioned here is that in addition to their corporate management policy briefing and their 3 financial results briefings, they also conducted approximately 400 individual and group meetings with shareholders and investors. And so the implication here is that there have been other meetings that have been mentioned on Nintendo's investor relations page throughout the last year, and in those meetings there could have been some information exchanged, perhaps even relating to Switch 2. Especially when you account for this next part here. Main dialogue topics and matters of interest to investors. Topics covered include financial results overview and business outlook, business momentum of Nintendo Switch, the next game console and business impact of hardware transition, IP strategy including the visual content business, capital policy, ESG, and sustainability initiatives. So you might have missed the big part that people are focusing on. Business momentum of Nintendo Switch and the next game console and business impact of a hardware transition. So here they're saying that there have been meetings where they have discussed the next generation console, the impact of the hardware transition, and just the overall business momentum of Nintendo Switch. And so people have taken with this, ran with it, and there are articles out there indicating that for sure, during this fiscal earnings release, Nintendo's going to detail the Switch 2. And I feel like that's a little bit of a jump there. Now, I'm not saying there isn't any reason to be excited, because they are telling us that they are talking about their next game console. They are talking about the impact of a hardware transition. But there are people out there that don't seem to think that this is that big of a deal. So taking to Twitter, Jeff Grub said this. It's a very vague reference to the next game console in a filing with investors. It doesn't mean anything more will actually happen. So this is him probably speaking on how these reports suggesting that Nintendo's about to talk about Switch 2 based off this recent news, not necessarily based off what Jeff Grubb believes. But then also DirectV Games, also known as Nate the Hate or Nate Drake depending on the place, says, it's a reference to topics covered in QA from their fiscal year 2024 meetings. Basically a minute summary from last year, not a sign of things to come. So yeah, DirectV Games is saying that it's not that big of a deal, because they're saying it's based off topics covered in the Q&A. But something I will note is that when we take a look at this, it's not just about the financial briefings where we've had those Q&As, but also these 400 individual groups and meetings that don't seem to have been public. So there have likely been discussions with investors about the next game console and the impact of a hardware transition. Like, that likely has happened behind the scenes in the prior fiscal year. Keep in mind, this report came out March 27th, 2024. So there likely has been some things going on behind the scenes, but that shouldn't really come as much of a shock. What I've been hoping for to see soon is Nintendo make some sort of acknowledgement of the console and give us some indication that it will be releasing in this upcoming fiscal year, because Nintendo hasn't really made any significant references or acknowledgements to the console. Nothing super substantial where we feel like we're getting close to something here. So I'm hoping we get to that. I hope we get something in this upcoming fiscal earnings release where they give us something more substantial than, yeah, we are concerned about the hardware transition and Switch momentum. I'm hoping they say, yeah, well, you know, we are planning something big and we will give you more details soon. That would be cool. That would indicate that they are planning an announcement relatively soon. Now, I will note that we did have this Q&A from February 6, 2024, and here they ask, I also like to know whether good performance in the Nintendo Switch business will impact the time frame for the launch of new hardware. And here at the end, it says, as we mentioned before, this is the response, articles claiming to reference information released by Nintendo and other speculations have been appearing mainly on the internet lately. Information that has not been officially announced by Nintendo can mislead consumers and investors. We encourage you to exercise good judgment based on the information we provide on our official websites and social media accounts. It takes a long time and thorough planning to get ready for new hardware, and those plans are not impacted by whatever the latest business conditions might be. So what's really interesting about this last part here, one, they are talking about Switch and the next generation hardware and all of that, so how they made reference in that corporate governance report, it could just be this, but it may be more. But here, at least what they're saying here, is that this idea that Nintendo may have delayed the Switch 2 because of the success of the Switch, they're indicating that would not be the case. Business conditions would not impact that because it's a long-term plan they've been working on. And it also leads me to wonder if the economy would impact things as well, because there's been a lot of discussion that the Japanese yen might be something that's holding Nintendo back from pushing forward. We have heard different reports that from a hardware perspective, Nintendo's basically ready, and other reports indicating that it's more of a software thing that we're sort of waiting for things to be prepared. But at least here Nintendo's saying that business conditions don't seem to impact the timing of their consoles. So whatever it is they're doing, they've at least told us publicly that there's been a long-term plan they've been putting together for this, they've been building up to this. And hopefully that means Nintendo gives us some kind of nugget here, because it has been a dry year in terms of Nintendo news, which, diminishes the excitement in the discussions, and so I'm hoping Nintendo finally opens up a little bit for this year, because they've been relatively quiet. But we shall see. Nothing's confirmed yet, nothing's guaranteed. I'm optimistic, but we won't know until it happens. I will say, though, that all this silence is likely building up to something. The calm before the storm. Now, when will that storm hit? That remains to be seen. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.